Hello everyone, and welcome back to Downvale. I'm aware that many of you use these videos to fall asleep. So before you doze off, I thought it would be a fun idea if each of you could leave a comment letting me know which part of the world you're listening from. Also, give a like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the episodes. Okay, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. In this new story, they found the body because the killer wouldn't stop calling. The quiet industrial outskirts of Wichita, Kansas remained undisturbed until a series of relentless phone calls began to flood the department in 2022. Marcus Thorne was a 45-year-old lead detective who had spent 2 decades investigating violent crimes across the central Kansas region. Lydia Vance was a 32-year-old emergency dispatcher who was responsible for managing the high volume of incoming reports that night. The primary objective of the local authorities was to locate a missing college student who had disappeared during a cold winter storm. Archived notes from the department suggested that the initial investigation had yielded very few leads despite the massive search efforts of community. The atmosphere in the station was tense because the freezing temperatures reduced the chances of finding the young man alive and well. The first call arrived at exactly 3:15 in the morning while the city was covered in a thick layer of frost. Lydia Vance answered the line, but she only heard the sound of heavy breathing and the faint rustle of dry autumn leaves. Reportedly, the caller did not speak for several minutes until he finally provided a set of coordinates for a remote rural field. State records indicate that the dispatch logs recorded a total of 14 separate calls from the same untraceable mobile device that night. Investigators never confirmed if the caller was using a voice modulator to hide his true identity from the emergency dispatch team. Detective Marcus Thorne drove his patrol vehicle toward the location while he maintained constant radio contact with the dispatch center in Wichita. The terrain was rugged, and the lack of artificial light made it difficult for him to see the path ahead of him. Some locals claimed that the area was used for illegal dumping, but the investigators never confirmed these rumors during the initial sweep. Records conflict regarding the exact tone of the caller, but Lydia Vance described the voice as being calm and oddly observational. He stayed in his car for a moment to check his equipment before he stepped out into the biting Kansas wind. The caller contacted the station again while the detective was still searching the perimeter of the abandoned barn on the edge of town. He insisted that the investigators were looking in the wrong section of the building, and he provided more specific and detailed instructions. The county file from 2009 mentioned a similar pattern of behavior in a case that had remained unsolved for years. Dispatch logs show that the caller seemed frustrated that the body had not been found within the first hour of his report. He told the dispatcher that the police were being lazy and that they needed to look much closer at the floor. Detective Thorne entered the basement of the barn, and he discovered a freshly poured slab of concrete that looked out of place. He noticed a single glove resting on the surface of the cold material, and he immediately called for a specialized forensic team. Investigators never confirmed why the killer felt the need to repeatedly call the station while the police were already at the scene. Archived notes suggest that the suspect might have been watching the entire investigation from a distance in the dark woods nearby. The detective felt a sense of being watched as he waited for the backup units to arrive at the remote location. The forensic team used heavy equipment to break through the concrete, while the dispatcher received one final call from the mysterious individual. The caller stated that the student was finally at rest, and then he disconnected the line before the signal could be traced. State records show that the body of the missing student was found exactly where the voice on the phone had indicated. The county file from 2009 was reopened to see if there was a connection between the two different crime scenes. Many people in Wichita were shocked by the cold nature of the crime and the boldness of the unidentified phone caller. A suspect was never officially identified because the mobile device used for the calls was found in a trash can 3 miles away. Investigators never confirmed if the DNA found on the phone belonged to the person who had committed the crime or a witness. Some locals claimed that they saw a dark sedan speeding away from the barn shortly after the police arrived on the scene. Records conflict regarding the physical description of the driver, but the archived notes mention a tall man in a heavy winter coat. The lack of physical evidence at the barn made it impossible for the prosecution to move forward with any charges. The state records from 2023 show that the investigation into the mysterious phone calls was officially suspended due to lack of leads. Marcus Thorne retired from the force in 2024, and he reportedly refused to discuss the details of the phone calls. The dispatch logs from that night are still studied by new recruits to understand the patterns of high-risk emergency communication. No one knows why the killer wouldn't stop calling until the body was finally recovered from the cold and dark earth. The mystery remains a haunting part of the local history in that small corner of the great state of Kansas. The archived notes from the lead investigator mentioned that the caller seemed to have a deep knowledge of the local police protocols. This led some to believe that the perpetrator might have had a background in law enforcement or emergency services in the past. County files from 2009 indicated that several former employees had been interviewed, but no one was ever officially charged. Investigators never confirmed if the calls were meant to be a confession or a twisted game of cat and mouse with police. The records conflict on whether the caller was the actual killer or just a witness who was too afraid to come. The missing student was a 20-year-old athlete who had no known enemies and a very bright future ahead of him. His family spent years looking for answers, but the state records remain silent on the identity of the person who ended his life. Lydia Vance reportedly left her job at the dispatch center because she couldn't stop hearing the voice of the caller in dreams. Some locals claimed that the barn was haunted by the spirit of the young man, but these stories were never officially confirmed. The building was eventually demolished in 2025 to make way for a new housing development in the growing region. The technical analysis of the dispatch logs revealed that the calls were routed through multiple proxy servers to hide the original location. Investigators never confirmed the level of technical skill required to execute such a complex series of phone calls without being caught. Archived notes from the Cybercrime Division suggested that the suspect was likely a middle-aged male with access to advanced software. Records conflict on whether the phone was purchased locally or if it was brought in from another state during the storm. The mystery of the calls continues to baffle the experts who study the behavior of serial offenders in the Midwest. One interesting detail in the county file from 2009 was the presence of a specific floral scent at the scene. Detectives noted that the air in the basement smelled like lavender, even though there were no plants or perfumes in the barn. Investigators never confirmed if this was a signature of the killer or if it was a coincidence related to the concrete. Some locals claimed that the scent of lavender was a warning that the killer was still in the area watching them. State records show that no similar crimes have occurred in the Wichita region since the discovery of the body in 20. The case of the talkative killer remains one of the most studied incidents in the history of Kansas criminal justice and psychology. Students at the university often debate the motives of a person who would risk their own freedom just to be heard. The dispatch logs provide a chilling look into the mind of someone who valued the spotlight more than their own safety. Marcus Thorne often told his colleagues that the caller was the most arrogant person he had ever encountered in his career. The legacy of the investigation lives on in the many files and records that are kept in the Wichita Police Department. The forensic evidence was re-examined in 2026 using the latest technology, but the results were still considered to be inconclusive. Investigators never confirmed if the small piece of fabric found near the concrete was related to the suspect or the victim. Archived notes show that the fabric was a common type used in industrial work clothes sold at many local hardware stores. The county file from 2009 remains the primary source of information for those who are interested in this code. It is a story that reminds everyone that sometimes the most dangerous part of a crime is the person who speaks. Reports from the State Record Division indicate that the student's family eventually moved out of the state to find some peace. They left behind a small memorial at the site of the barn, which is now covered by a new suburban street. Some locals claimed that they can still hear a phone ringing in the distance when the wind blows from the north. These claims are dismissed by the authorities as simple imagination, fueled by the dark history of the empty and quiet field. The truth of what happened that night in 2022 may never be fully known by the people of Wichita. Lydia Vance wrote a book about her experience at the dispatch center, but the state records prevented her from sharing specific. She described the feeling of being connected to a killer through a thin wire while the rest of the world slept. Archived notes from her publisher show that the book was a bestseller in the Midwest region for several months in. Many readers were fascinated by the idea of a killer who was so desperate for a discovery that he became. Investigators never confirmed if any of the details in the book were true or if they were added for dramatic. The mystery of the phone calls has inspired several documentaries and true crime podcasts that explore the dark side of Kansas. Each creator tries to find a new angle or a piece of evidence that the original investigators might have missed. Records conflict on whether the caller ever contacted any other agencies or if he only focused on the Wichita Dispatch Center. Some locals claimed that he was a disgruntled former employee who wanted to embarrass the department during a high profile. The state records remain the most reliable source of facts in a case that is filled with many conflicting theories. Marcus Thorne lived out his final years in a small house near the mountains, and he never looked back at Kansas. He reportedly kept a copy of the dispatch logs in a safe at his home, but he never showed them. Archived notes from his neighbors suggest that he was a quiet man who spent most of his time reading, and investigators never confirmed if he had his own theories about the identity of the person who wouldn't stop calling them. The silence of his retirement was a sharp contrast to the chaotic night in 2022 that changed his. The final entry in the county file from 2009 was a short note from the lead detective at time. He wrote that some people want to be caught because they cannot live with the weight of what they did. This theory might explain why the killer in 2022 was so insistent on the police finding the hidden. Investigators never confirmed if guilt was the primary motive or if it was simply a desire for power and control. The case remains open in the digital archives of the state, but the physical evidence has long since been destroyed. Wichita, Kansas is a city that has seen many things, but the story of the talkative killer is one of. The residents still talk about the night the phone wouldn't stop ringing at the station while the snow was falling. State records show that the community has become more vigilant and that the police have updated their emergency communication systems. The archived notes and the dispatch logs are a part of a past that many people would rather forget forever. It is a story that begins with a phone call and ends with a discovery that no one ever wanted. The concrete slab at the barn was analyzed by a geologist who noted that the mixture was of very high. This suggested that the person who poured it had professional experience in construction or masonry work, according to the records. Investigators never confirmed if any local contractors were missing a bag of cement or a set of tools that week. Archived notes from the site investigation show that the area was cleaned of all fingerprints before the police officers arrived. This level of preparation conflicts with the impulsive nature of the phone calls that were made to the dispatch center. The student's phone was never recovered, even though the police searched the entire area around the barn and the woods. Records conflict on whether the victim's device was turned off immediately after the abduction or if it stayed on for. Some locals claimed that they received strange text messages from the student's number weeks after he was found in the. Investigators never confirmed these reports because the service provider could not find any record of the messages in their system. The county file from 2009 remains the most comprehensive document on the strange behavior of the local criminals. The investigation into the talkative killer has led to new laws regarding the tracking of prepaid mobile devices in Kansas. State records show that these changes were implemented to help authorities identify callers during emergency situations more quickly and easily. The archived notes from the legislative session mention the Wichita case as a primary reason for the new legal requirements. Many people believe that these laws will prevent a similar mystery from ever happening again in the future of the Clost effect. Investigators never confirmed if the new technology would have been enough to catch the person who called Lydia Vance that. Every year, the local news runs a story on the anniversary of the discovery to keep the case in the fore. They interview the retired detectives and the former dispatchers who still remember the sound of the breathing on the line. Records conflict on whether any new tips have been received in recent years, but the police say they are always. The county file from 2009 is a reminder that the truth is often hidden in the most obvious. No one has ever come forward to claim the reward that was offered for information leading to an arrest. The barn is gone and the field is full of houses, but the memory of the night remains in the two. People who live in the new development sometimes find old pieces of wood or metal in their backyards while gardening. They don't always know the history of the land or the reason why the police were there so many years. State records indicate that the soil was tested for contaminants, but it was found to be clean and safe for. The archived notes from the demolition crew show that they were instructed to be very careful with the foundation. The story of the killer who wouldn't stop calling is a testament to the fact that secrets are hard. It shows that even the most careful criminal can be undone by their own need to be seen, and investigators never confirmed the final destination of the person who made those calls from the untraceable phone that cold night. The dispatch logs for 2022 are now a digital memory stored in a cold server in the 10th. The mystery of the Wichita student and the voice on the phone will continue to haunt the state of in this news story. The dispatch log surfaced during a routine systems review and carried a warning message that immediately stood out as improper. The note stated clearly that this dispatch log was not meant for you. Cal Reddick was 38 years old and worked as a records technician inside a county emergency communications center. His job rarely involved urgency. Most days were quiet, filled with verification tasks, cross-checking timestamps, and confirming that old data matched newer database formats. He liked the predictability of the work and the sense that nothing unexpected ever happened in archives. The building itself was utilitarian and aging, a concrete structure with narrow windows and humming fluorescent lights. It sat on the outskirts of a mid-sized city, far from downtown noise, yet it never truly slept. Radios crackled constantly, keyboards clicked, and distant voices overlapped through headsets and speakers. That morning, Cal arrived earlier than usual to finish an audit ahead of schedule. A system migration was planned for later that month, and management wanted to ensure that legacy records from older platforms transferred cleanly. Cal had done this exact task many times before without issue. He logged into the archive terminal, selected a routine date range from 2005, and applied the filter. The system lagged longer than expected. The spinning cursor paused, then vanished. Instead of the usual list of dozens of calls, only a single record appeared. Cal frowned and adjusted the filter settings, assuming a mistake. He reapplied the parameters carefully, confirming the date range and call types. The same single record remained, stubbornly ignoring his input. He clicked the entry and examined the metadata. The incident code was ordinary. The timestamp aligned correctly with the year selected. The dispatcher ID appeared valid. Nothing seemed corrupted. Then he noticed the supervisor remarks field. It contained a single sentence. This dispatch log was not meant for you. Cal leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. Supervisor remarks were rare and tightly regulated. They were meant for procedural clarifications, never warnings. The phrasing was unprofessional, almost confrontational, and felt directed at the reader rather than the record. He checked the user ID associated with the remark. The account belonged to a former operations manager who had retired more than a decade earlier. According to policy, the account should have been disabled long before this note was entered. Cal assumed it was an artifact from an undocumented test or perhaps an annotation left during a chaotic transition period. Still, protocol required him to review attached media. He opened the audio file linked to the log. The duration read 48 seconds. Short calls happened often, especially hang-ups or accidental dials. He pressed play. The first few seconds contained only low-level static and ambient noise. There was a faint electrical hum consistent with older recording equipment. Around the 3-second mark, a soft click sounded, like a handset being placed onto a cradle. After that, there was silence. Cal replayed the audio at a higher volume. Beneath the static, something shifted. The noise floor fluctuated subtly, like breath near a microphone. Then a quiet voice surfaced briefly. It spoke a single word twice. Cal. Cal froze. His immediate reaction was disbelief. Audio artifacts could resemble speech when filtered improperly. The human brain was notorious for hearing patterns where none existed. He replayed the clip again, watching the waveform carefully. The peaks aligned exactly with the syllables he heard. The pattern repeated on every playback. He closed the audio window and opened the call notes. There was one line written by the dispatcher who had taken the call. It stated that the caller repeated a name twice and that the voice matched the dispatcher channel. That sentence unsettled him deeply. Caller audio should never appear on dispatcher channels. The system architecture physically prevented that. Monitor channels were one-way feeds designed only for supervisors to listen silently. Cal checked the routing data. The source channel listed was indeed a supervisor monitor channel. There was no record of intake audio being routed there. He felt a knot form in his stomach. Cal minimized the screen and took a moment to steady himself. There had to be a rational explanation. Old systems behaved strangely under certain conditions. Grounding issues, power fluctuations, or misconfigured hardware could cause anomalies. He searched the archive for similar supervisor remarks. To his surprise, he found 3 more logs containing the exact same warning sentence, each originated from a different year. He opened the first. The audio contained the same static, the same click, and the same faint voice. This time, it spoke a different name twice, Lorne. The second log said Mavis. The third said a surname Cal did not recognize. Each voice sounded nearly identical in tone and cadence. Each clip lasted under a minute. Each originated from a supervisor monitor channel. Cal printed the summaries and walked them to his supervisor, Marla Hensley. She was 51 years old and had spent most of her career in emergency communications. She prided herself on calm decision-making and strict adherence to policy. She reviewed the pages in silence, her expression carefully neutral. When she finished, she asked where he had found them. Cal explained the filter malfunction and the retired account. Marla sighed quietly and rubbed her temple. She told him she would take responsibility for the issue and instructed him to stop investigating those files. Her tone was measured but firm. Cal returned to his desk, unsettled. He understood hierarchy, but curiosity gnawed at him. These logs were anomalies, and ignoring anomalies went against his professional instincts. Later that afternoon, when staffing thinned and the room grew quieter, Cal reopened the files. He justified it as necessary documentation. He ran audio analysis on the clips using internal tools. The noise floor matched recordings from the old dispatch room layout. The electrical hum frequency aligned with power supplies that had been replaced years earlier. The handset click matched a model phased out before 2008. The voices across all clips shared identical frequency characteristics. It suggested a single source, not multiple callers. Cal cross-referenced personnel records with the names spoken. Lorne had been a dispatcher who resigned after a prolonged stress leave. Mavis had been a night supervisor who transferred abruptly after reporting sleep disturbances. The surname belonged to a temporary technician who worked only one winter. Each individual had access to the archive. Each worked night shifts. Each left the center within months of the log appearing. Cal reviewed maintenance tickets from the same nights. One mentioned intermittent crosstalk during a severe storm. Another described a grounding fault near the microwave relay tower. A third referenced a generator test that isolated several channels. He assembled a timeline. Every log appeared shortly before audits or system upgrades. Cal hypothesized a rare feedback condition. A monitor channel might have looped unintentionally, capturing internal sound and reshaping it through compression. Yet the names troubled him. The specificity felt intentional. He slowed one clip further and filtered background noise. The voice sounded older than any dispatcher he knew. It was strained, as if the speaker struggled to push air through the words. Cal requested archived security footage from one of the nights. The footage showed a dispatcher seated alone at the console. At the moment the audio click occurred, the handset shifted slightly as if touched. No one stood nearby. He returned to Marla with his findings and asked to escalate formally. She listened, then admitted there had been an internal inquiry years earlier. The conclusion at that time blamed equipment faults and human perception errors. The files were sealed to prevent panic and rumors. She explained that the retired manager who entered the warning note believed listening to the logs caused the system to target the listener. He insisted the logs should never be opened again. Cal asked if there was evidence supporting that belief. Marla said exhaustion and stress could warp interpretation, especially during night shifts. That night, Cal slept poorly. At 3 a.m, his phone rang from an unknown number. He answered and heard static and a faint click. The line stayed open for 30 seconds. Cal said hello twice. No voice replied. The call ended without a disconnect tone. His phone showed no record of the call. The next morning, Cal reported the incident. Marla authorized a controlled test using offline equipment. They recreated the legacy routing configuration and introduced known faults. At first, nothing unusual occurred. Then, a grounding cable was loosened briefly. A monitor feed leaked into intake, creating a feedback loop. Ambient noise amplified and compressed into shapes that resembled speech. When replayed, the output produced fragments resembling names stored in the system buffer. The system cached recently accessed user data. Under certain failures, those fragments surfaced audibly. They documented everything. The phenomenon was mechanical, not conscious. The explanation fit the evidence. The warning existed to prevent distress during audits. Misinterpretation caused fear. Cal accepted the conclusion. The migration completed successfully. The old system was decommissioned. Years later, during dismantling, a technician found a handwritten note inside a metal chassis. It read, "Do not open the logs." Cal never learned who placed it there. He understood why someone would. The system never intended to speak, yet it always sounded personal. The dispatch log was not meant for him. Understanding it was. In this new story, the last voice on the phone wasn't human. The communication towers located outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, remained perfectly silent until a series of anomalous signals began to disrupt frequencies in 2024. Leo Miller was a 35-year-old radio technician who worked for the local forestry department to monitor the critical equipment. He spent his long nights in a small metal cabin near the base of the tower while the wind whistled through pines. His primary goal was to ensure that the emergency channels remained clear for the park rangers who patrolled the very rugged terrain. Archived notes from the department suggested that Leo was a meticulous employee who never missed a single log entry during his shift. He don't usually experience any issues with the hardware because the system was updated during the summer of 2022 recently. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, the signal on frequency 44.9 began to pulse with a very strange rhythmic static. Dispatch logs from the main station in the city indicated that no authorized personnel were using that specific channel at that time. Leo Miller reportedly recorded a sound that he described as a mix of a human voice and a mechanical grinding noise. Some locals claimed that they heard similar sounds coming from their own personal scanners, but the investigators never confirmed these unofficial reports. The state records indicate that the signal strength was coming from a location deep within the northern part of the region. Leo adjusted the gain on his receiver, and he attempted to filter out the background noise to identify the source. He heard a voice that sounded like a young woman speaking in a language that he could not immediately recognize or understand properly. The archived notes from his personal journal described the voice as having a melodic quality that felt both familiar and deeply unsettling. County file from 2009 mentioned a similar occurrence during a massive solar storm, but the data from 2024 was different. Investigators never confirmed if the signal was a digital echo or a genuine transmission from a person in distress out there. The technician contacted his supervisor, whose name was Sarah Jenkins, who was a 48-year-old communications director for the state. Sarah Jenkins arrived at the tower site within 40 minutes, and she began to analyze the raw data coming from the antenna. She noticed that the signal was not following the standard patterns of a human voice or a traditional radio broadcast signal at all. Records conflict regarding whether the sound was biological in origin or if it was a sophisticated digital hoax created by local hackers. Some locals claimed that the woods around Flagstaff were home to secret government testing facilities that used high-frequency radio waves. The voice on the line began to repeat the name of a technician who had gone missing in the woods back in 2011. His name was Thomas Ward, and he was a 40-year-old surveyor who disappeared while he was mapping the trails. Dispatch logs from 2011 show that the search for Thomas Ward was called off after 6 weeks of finding nothing. Leo Miller felt a sense of dread as he heard the voice say the name over and over with a strange tone. Archived notes from the original case file state that Thomas Ward had no living relatives who would be calling for him then. Sarah Jenkins used a directional microphone to try and pinpoint the exact coordinates of the signal, which seemed to be moving slowly. The state records indicate that the signal was shifting between the various towers in the region without any loss of its clarity. Investigators never confirmed why the signal was able to bypass the security encryption that was installed on the Forestry Department network. Some locals claimed that the sound wasn't coming from a radio at all, but was vibrating through the very air. Leo Miller reportedly felt a vibration in his own teeth as the voice grew louder and more aggressive on the open channel. The voice began to mimic the sounds of the forest, including the chirping of birds and the rustling of dry leaves. It sounded like a perfect recording, but the timing was off by several seconds compared to the actual sounds outside the cabin. County File from 2009 mentions a phenomenon where natural sounds are reflected by the unique mineral deposits in the soil. Investigators never confirmed if this was the case or if something else was manipulating the environment around the tower site. Leo Miller refused to leave the cabin because he felt that something was watching him from the edge of the woods. At 4:30 in the morning, the voice spoke a sentence in clear English that was directed specifically at the technician Leo Miller. It told him to open the door of the cabin and step outside so that it could see his face clearly. The archived notes from the dispatch center record Sarah Jenkins screaming for Leo to ignore the voice and stay inside the cabin. Records conflict on whether the door was actually opened or if the latch had failed due to the extreme cold weather. Some locals claimed that they saw a bright light hovering over the tower at the exact moment the transmission finally ended. The signal vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and the radio frequencies returned to their normal state of quiet. State records from 2024 show that Leo Miller was found the next morning sitting on the floor of the cabin. He was physically unharmed, but he was unable to speak or provide a statement to the authorities about what he heard. Investigators never confirmed what happened to the recording that Leo had made during the 3 hours of the strange and rhythmic. The archived notes from the technician were confiscated by a federal agency only 2 days after the incident had taken place. Sarah Jenkins resigned from her position and moved to the eastern region of the country without leaving a forwarding address. She don't talk to the media about the events of that night in 2024, even though many have tried. County File from 2009 remains the only official document that lists the strange frequency anomalies found in the Flagstaff area. Some locals claimed that the voice was a remnant of a lost civilization that once lived in the caves near there. Investigators never confirmed this theory because there is no archaeological evidence to support such a claim in the modern state records. The communication tower was eventually dismantled and moved to a different location after the local residents complained about the strange noises. State records indicate that the new site has not experienced any unusual signals or voice transmissions since it was opened then. Leo Miller reportedly lives in a care facility where he spends his days listening to white noise on a radio. Archived notes from his doctors suggest that he is waiting for a message that he believes will eventually come back again. The mystery of the last voice on the phone remains a cold case for the authorities in northern Arizona today still. Investigators never confirmed if the voice was human, but they did find a set of footprints near the base of tower. The footprints were not made by boots or any known animal found in the state records of the local wildlife department. Records conflict on the size and the depth of the prints, which seem to disappear into the solid rock nearby. Some locals claimed that the voice can still be heard on old analog radios if you drive far enough. The dispatch logs from 2024 are still classified as sensitive information by the Forestry Department for reasons that remain unknown. Thomas Ward was never found, and his name was eventually removed from the active missing persons list in the county file. His family had long since moved away, and there was no one left to advocate for a deeper investigation into him. Archived notes from the lead detective in 2011 show that he believed Thomas had simply walked away from his life. The voice on the phone suggested otherwise, but without a body or a physical location, the case could not open. Leo Miller's experience is often dismissed as a psychological break by those who weren't there to hear the grinding in voice. The radio technician who replaced Leo Miller reported that he found a strange inscription carved into the metal wall of cabin. It was a series of numbers that matched the frequency where the voice was first heard by Leo and Sarah Jenkins. State records show that the cabin was repainted and the inscription was removed before the next shift began in 2020. Investigators never confirmed who carved the numbers or why they were hidden behind a small piece of loose metal paneling. Some locals claimed that the numbers were a warning for anyone who dared to listen to the sounds of the night. The forest remains a place of beauty and danger where the wind can sound like a voice if you listen. Many people visit the area near Flagstaff, Arizona to enjoy the hiking trails and the scenic views of the high peaks. They don't know about the night in 2024 when a man listened to a voice that wasn't human. The archived notes and the dispatch logs are hidden away in a building that most people will never have access. The concrete and the steel of the tower have been recycled, and the land has slowly reclaimed the site of tower. Every year, on the anniversary of the event, some enthusiasts gather near the old site with their high-powered scanners. They hope to catch a glimpse of the signal or hear a single word from the woman on the radio. State records show that no such signal has been detected since the tower was removed from the mountain in 2020. Investigators never confirmed if the voice was a ghost or a prank or something far more biological and ancient indeed. Records conflict on the details, but the story of Leo Miller continues to grow in the local folklore of region. The last voice on the phone was recorded by a secondary backup system that was unknown to the technicians then. This recording was reportedly sent to a research lab in California for a detailed acoustic analysis of the strange sounds. The results of the study were never made public, and the lab has since closed its doors to the public. Some locals claimed that the voice was actually a warning about a coming storm that would change the region forever then. Investigators never confirmed this because the weather patterns have remained normal for the last several years of the 2020s. Leo Miller's sister attempted to sue the state for the emotional distress caused to her brother during his time there. The case was dismissed by a judge who cited a lack of evidence and the classified nature of the logs. Archived notes from the court proceedings show that the state denied any knowledge of the anomalous signals or the missing. The county file from 2009 was briefly mentioned, but it was deemed irrelevant to the current situation now. Leo remains in his quiet room while the world moves on and the radio towers continue to hum in the voice. The mystery of Thomas Ward and the voice that knew his name will likely never be solved by the police. It serves as a reminder that the technology we use to communicate can sometimes pick up things we are not. State records are full of things that cannot be explained by the laws of physics or the rules of engineering. Investigators never confirmed what they truly believed about the night in 2024 because their reports were heavily redacted. Some locals claimed that the voice was simply looking for a way home after being lost in the airwaves. The silence of the forest is often interrupted by the sound of the wind or the call of a bird. If you find yourself near Flagstaff, Arizona in the middle of the night, you might want to turn off radio. You never know who might be listening on the other end of the line or what they might want. The archived notes and the dispatch logs are just paper, but the memory of the voice is something that lasts. Records conflict on many things, but the fear that Leo Miller felt was very real and it was cold. The county file from 2009 is now a digital document that is stored on a secure server. It contains the names of many people who have seen things in the woods that they cannot explain to others. Investigators never confirmed if the frequency 44.9 is safe to use for regular emergency communication in the state. Some locals claimed that the frequency is cursed and that anyone who uses it will eventually hear the voice again. The state records indicate that the channel is now reserved for testing purposes only, and it is rarely used. The last voice on the phone was never meant to be heard by anyone, especially not a technician like Leo. It was a mistake in the fabric of the world that allowed a piece of the past to speak. Archived notes from the Historical Society suggest that the area was once used for early radio experiments in the 19th. Investigators never confirmed if these experiments left a permanent mark on the environment or the local radio spectrum in the records conflict on the details of those early tests, but the stories remain as a part of the local history. Sarah Jenkins reportedly wrote a book about her experiences under a pseudonym, but it was never published by any house. The manuscript is said to contain the full transcript of the conversation between Leo Miller and the voice from air. Some locals claimed that they have seen a copy of the book in a small library in the South. Investigators never confirmed the existence of the manuscript or the claims made within its pages regarding the strange signal. The story remains a whisper in the wind that blows through the tall pines of the northern Arizona forest today. The final report on the incident was filed in 2025, and it concluded that the event was inconclusive. It noted that while the audio evidence was compelling, there was no way to verify the source of the transmission. State records show that the case is officially closed, but many people in the department still talk about it. Investigators never confirmed the identity of the woman or the reason why she knew the name of Thomas. The dispatch logs remain the only objective evidence of the night when the breathing spoke back through the radio system. Leo Miller's room is filled with the sound of static because it is the only thing that helps him sleep. He don't like the silence anymore because he is afraid of what he might hear if the room is quiet. Archived notes from his caregivers state that he often talks to the air as if someone is standing there. Some locals claimed that they can hear him through the walls of the facility during the middle of the night. The county file from 2009 is a long way from the quiet room where Leo stays. The communication tower site is now a clearing where the grass grows thick and the birds build their small nests. There is no sign that a metal cabin or a massive antenna ever stood on the rocky ground in Arizona. State records indicate that the land has been designated as a protected wilderness area to prevent any further industrial work. Investigators never confirmed if the decision to protect the land was related to the events of 2024. Records conflict on the motivation of the state board, but the result is a place of peace and silence. The last voice on the phone wasn't human, but it knew exactly how to make a person feel. It was a bridge between two worlds that should have remained separate and silent for the rest of time. Archived notes from the project suggest that some secrets are better left buried in the woods of northern Arizona. Investigators never confirmed the true nature of the signal, but they will never forget the sound of the grinding. The dispatch logs for 2024 are a testament to the fact that we are never truly alone. This case remains a warning to those who seek to listen to the hidden sounds that travel through the air. Leo Miller waits for a call that will never come while the towers continue to watch over the forest. In this news story, the official log shows the emergency call entered the system at a time when the caller was already confirmed deceased by responders. In late autumn of 2012, the Pine Hollow Emergency Communications Center handled calls for a wide rural county with scattered towns. The center was small, underfunded, and staffed by people who knew each other too well. The night shift was usually quiet, broken by medical alarms and weather-related accidents on the highway. That night began no differently, with routine radio checks and idle chatter kept low. At 11:14, a call came in from a mobile phone near the edge of the county map. The system tagged it with a weak signal warning and a delayed location fix. The dispatcher who answered was Alton Reyes, age 43, a former EMT who moved inside after a back injury. He was known for his careful questioning and slow pace. Alton delivered the standard greeting and asked for the nature of the emergency. The caller responded with a man's voice that sounded strained and uneven. The man said he had been hurt badly and could not move. He said he was alone, cold, and losing strength fast. Alton asked for a location, and the caller struggled to answer. He gave partial directions using landmarks that sounded rural and outdated. The caller said he was near an old service road beyond a locked gate close to a river bend. He said there was an abandoned pump house nearby. Alton typed quickly, trying to triangulate the description while keeping the man talking. He asked about injuries and bleeding. The caller said he had fallen, possibly been struck, and his leg would not respond. His breathing sounded shallow and wet. Alton reassured him and said help was on the way, though he had not dispatched yet. He needed a clearer fix before sending units blind. The system finally produced a rough location circle, placing the call near a decommissioned quarry road. Alton dispatched a deputy and a rescue unit. The caller's voice weakened as the call continued. He asked Alton to stay on the line, saying he was afraid to close his eyes. Alton kept him talking, asking simple questions about his name and age. The caller said his name was Bram Holloway, age 38. Alton asked Bram to describe what he could see around him. Bram mentioned water, weeds, and a concrete structure with rusted rails. The call lasted 8 minutes before Bram's voice faded. He stopped responding to questions, and the line went silent but did not disconnect. Alton stayed on the line for another minute, calling Bram's name. Eventually, the system dropped the call automatically. Alton logged the call as an active medical emergency with loss of contact. He updated the responding units with the last known details. The deputy arrived first, navigating the service road by spotlight and memory. He found a vehicle off the road near the river access. The rescue unit arrived minutes later. They found Bram Holloway lying near the pump house, unresponsive and badly injured. The medic checked for signs of life and found none. Bram was pronounced dead at 11:26. The deputy radioed the time of death, and the scene shifted from rescue to investigation. Alton received the update and closed the incident. That should have been the end of it, a tragic but ordinary outcome in a rural county. It was not. At 11:34, 20 minutes after the original call began, a new entry appeared in the system. It was a 911 call from Bram Holloway's phone. The log showed it as a completed call, duration 2 minutes and 12 seconds. The timestamp placed it after the confirmed time of death. Alton noticed the entry while reviewing his queue. He assumed it was a system error or delayed log artifact. He opened the call record and froze. The call was marked, answered, and recorded, with his own extension listed as the handler. Alton knew he had not taken another call from that number. He flagged the entry and called his supervisor. The supervisor on duty was Maria Klein, age 50, who had run the center for over a decade. She walked over and looked at the screen. Maria checked the routing details and frowned. The call showed a clean connection, no dropped packets, and a normal audio file size. They pulled the recording and listened in the small review room. The audio made the air feel thin. The caller's voice was Bram Holloway's voice. It sounded weaker than before, but unmistakable. Bram spoke slowly, as if conserving energy. He said he was still there, and nobody came. He said he could hear vehicles earlier, but they went away. He said it hurt to breathe. The voice stopped for several seconds, then continued. Bram said he thought he was already dead. Alton felt sick listening to the playback. He checked the timestamps again and again, hoping for a clerical explanation. Maria stopped the recording and documented the anomaly. She ordered the file restricted and notified County IT. The responding deputy returned to the station after clearing the scene. He confirmed again that Bram had no pulse when found. The medic confirmed the same. The time of death was consistent and documented by 2 professionals. IT reviewed the system logs overnight. They found no evidence of delayed buffering or duplicated entries. The call appeared to originate from Bram's phone after it was powered off at the scene. That detail made no sense. Maria escalated the issue to the county communications director. He advised caution and minimal disclosure. The next morning, a detective named Rowan Isles, age 49, was assigned to review the case. He approached it like a standard investigation. Rowan listened to both recordings back to back. He noted that the second call referenced details from the first, including Alton's reassurances. Rowan checked the phone recovery report. Bram's phone battery was found dead and removed during evidence processing. The phone showed no outgoing calls after the initial 911 contact. The carrier confirmed the same. Rowan considered the possibility of voicemail or delayed network behavior. The carrier ruled it out based on timestamps. The audio file metadata showed it was recorded in real time, not reconstructed. That closed another door. Rowan interviewed Alton, who repeated his account without variation. Alton looked exhausted and deeply unsettled. Rowan then interviewed Maria, who described the system behavior and her decision to restrict access. The investigation expanded to include the pump house area. Rowan returned to the scene with daylight and better visibility. The area was isolated with limited access points and no nearby residences. The pump house was concrete and partially collapsed. Inside, Rowan noticed scrape marks near the wall and a shallow pool of water beneath a broken pipe. He also noticed something else. There were footprints leading away from where Bram had been found. The prints were partial and distorted, but they suggested movement after the time Bram should have been incapacitated. Rowan asked the deputy why the prints were not mentioned in the original report. The deputy said he assumed they were from responders. Rowan compared boot patterns and found they did not match. The prints were smaller and irregular. Rowan expanded the timeline and requested phone pings from nearby towers. He wanted to know who else was in the area. The carrier returned a list of devices that briefly connected near the service road. One number stood out. The number belonged to a prepaid phone activated 2 days earlier. It pinged the area shortly before the second call. Rowan traced the prepaid phone to a convenience store purchase. The clerk remembered selling it to a man who paid cash. The description was vague, but the man asked about coverage near the quarry road. That detail raised concern. Rowan requested access to the second call audio again. He listened with headphones this time. He noticed faint sounds beneath Bram's voice. There was a rhythmic clicking and a low mechanical hum. Rowan sent the audio to a state forensic lab for analysis. The lab confirmed the sounds were not artifacts. They identified the clicking as a relay switch common in portable recording devices. The hum matched a small generator. That suggested the second call was not placed from Bram's phone directly. It was likely replayed or relayed. Rowan returned to the pump house and searched more thoroughly. Behind a fallen panel, he found a small generator. Next to it was a portable transmitter and a recording device. The setup was crude but functional. The recorder contained several files labeled by date. One file was Bram's initial 911 call. Another file was the second call, edited to remove pauses. It was designed to sound continuous and desperate. Rowan realized the truth was worse than a system error. Someone had recorded Bram and replayed his voice after death. The purpose was unclear, but the effect was chilling. It made responders question reality and procedure. Rowan checked the footprints again and followed them toward the riverbank. They led to a shallow crossing. On the other side, the trail disappeared into brush. No vehicle tracks were found. Rowan reviewed missing persons and prior incidents near the quarry road. He found 2 older cases with similarities. In one case, a hiker reported hearing voices calling for help after dark. Responders found nobody. In another, a late-night call was logged but traced to a dead phone. That case was dismissed years earlier. Rowan suspected a pattern, someone exploiting emergency systems for unknown reasons. He needed a suspect. The prepaid phone led nowhere, but the equipment suggested technical knowledge. Rowan looked for former contractors. He found a name in county records, a former infrastructure tech dismissed after conflicts over access. The tech lived out of county and owned similar equipment. Rowan requested an interview. The man denied involvement and had an alibi that night. The evidence was circumstantial and thin. The case stalled without a clear suspect. The equipment was logged and the scene was cleared. Maria implemented new procedures at the center. Any delayed or duplicate call logs were to be audited immediately. Alton took leave for several weeks. He said he could not hear Bram's voice without losing focus. When he returned, he avoided night shifts. He also avoided the quarry road on his commute. The county closed the investigation quietly, citing lack of prosecutable evidence. The files were restricted. Officially, the second call was attributed to malicious interference using recorded audio. Unofficially, dispatchers remembered the detail that never fit cleanly. The second call included a phrase Bram never said earlier. In the replayed call, Bram thanked Alton by name. He had never given his name during the first call. That detail suggested Bram was conscious longer than responders believed, or someone edited the audio carefully. Alton still thinks about that phrase years later. He wonders when Bram learned his name. The call log remains in the system, a completed call after a confirmed death. New dispatchers hear about it during training, framed as a lesson in verification and caution. They are told to trust procedures, but also to question anomalies. They are never told how it felt to hear a dead man ask for help again. Some nights, when the lines are quiet, Alton still checks timestamps twice. He knows the system records what it is given, not what should be possible. And he knows that somewhere between the call and the log, something chose to speak again. In this news story, she thought she was home alone until the breathing spoke back. The quiet suburban neighborhood in Savannah, Georgia, remained perfectly still until a single frantic call reached the emergency dispatch center in 2021. Sarah Miller was a 24-year-old freelance graphic designer who lived alone in a large house near the historic district. She spent most of her nights working in the small office, while the rest of the neighborhood remained silent under the trees. The archived notes from the local rental agency indicated that she had moved into the property only 3 months before the incident. Her primary goal was to establish her business in a new city while she enjoyed the privacy of the old Victorian home. She often stayed awake until the early morning hours to finish her design projects for clients located in the western region. The house featured high ceilings and original wooden floors that often creaked during the temperature changes of the late evening in Georgia. Reportedly, Sarah didn't think much of the noises at first because the structure was over 100 years old, according to records. State records from 2018 show that the previous owners had performed extensive renovations on the attic and the primary crawl spaces. She felt safe behind the heavy oak doors and the modern security system that she had installed shortly after her arrival. The house was a fortress of solitude that allowed her to focus on her creative work without any outside world distractions. On the night of October 14th, Sarah was working on a project while she listened to the soft hum of the air. She reportedly heard a faint sound that resembled a rhythmic intake of air coming from the dark hallway outside of her office. The dispatch logs from that evening later recorded her description of the sound as being consistent with a person sleeping nearby. She stopped her work and waited for the sound to repeat itself while she sat perfectly still in her ergonomic desk. She didn't want to believe that someone else was inside the home while she was trying to finish her important work. The house was supposed to be empty, but the sound of the breathing grew louder as she approached the open office door. Some locals claimed that the house had a history of strange occurrences, but the official investigators never confirmed any of those stories. Sarah reached for her phone while she kept her eyes fixed on the shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper and hallway. She whispered a question into the darkness to see if a friend or a family member had entered the house without. The breathing suddenly stopped, and a low voice responded with a single word that Sarah could not identify in the moment. Archived notes from the police interview mentioned that the voice sounded tired and dry, as if the person had not spoken. The county file from 2015 described a similar incident where a squatter was found living in the walls of a braga. Sarah locked herself in the office and immediately called 911 while she hid under the large wooden desk in. The dispatch logs show that she remained on the line for 7 minutes while the officers were traveling to her remote. She could hear the sound of footsteps moving slowly across the wooden floorboards just outside the locked door of her office. Officer James Bennett was a 30-year-old patrolman who arrived at the scene with his partner during the early morning. They searched the main floor and the kitchen, but they found no evidence of a break-in or any missing items. State records indicate that the officers checked every closet and the space under the beds while Sarah waited safely in there. They reportedly believed that the sounds might have been caused by the ventilation system or a small animal trapped in the. The search continued into the attic, where the officers found a small pile of blankets and some empty food wrappers near. Archive notes from the forensic team suggested that someone had been living in the crawlspace for at least several weeks. The county file from 2009 warned about the vulnerabilities of these historic homes in the southern region of the. Investigators never confirmed the identity of the person because they found no identification or personal documents in the hidden living area. Records conflict regarding whether the intruder was still inside the house when the police officers first arrived at the front door. Some locals claimed that they saw a tall figure running through the backyard and into the dense woods behind the. The state records show that a canine unit was deployed, but the scent was lost near the edge of the saltwater. Sarah decided to stay with a friend that night because she didn't feel safe returning to the empty house after the. 1 week later, a contractor was hired to seal the hidden crawl spaces and the various gaps in the old wooden. He discovered a series of small holes that had been drilled into the floorboards of the office where Sarah usually worked. Archive notes from the construction company indicated that these holes provided a direct line of sight from the crawlspace. This discovery meant that the intruder could watch her while she worked at her desk during the long nights in 20. The county file from 2015 revealed that the house had been used as a rental for seasonal workers for many. One of the previous tenants was a 35-year-old man who had been evicted for failing to pay. Investigators never confirmed if this individual was the one who had returned to live in the secret spaces of the tent. The dispatch logs show that Sarah reported seeing a similar figure standing near the fence line 2 months after the initial. The case remained open for several years, but the police never made an arrest due to the lack of physical evidence. Sarah Miller eventually sold the property and moved to a modern apartment building in the city of Atlanta, Georgia in 20. She reportedly told the local news that she still checks the closets and the vents every night before she goes. The archived notes from the real estate agent show that the house was sold to a young couple from the. State records indicate that the new owners have not reported any unusual sounds or intruders since they moved into the home. However, some locals claimed that the breathing can still be heard if you stand in the office during a very. The county file from 2015 remains a disturbing reminder of how easy it is for a stranger to hide. No one really knows who was living in the walls of that house or what their true intentions were for. The investigators never confirmed if the voice that spoke back to Sarah was trying to warn her or if it records conflict on the exact words that were spoken into the darkness of the hallway on that cold night in. The dispatch logs are the only official record of the terror that Sarah felt while she waited for the police. She doesn't like to talk about the incident anymore because the memory of the breathing is still very vivid in. The archive notes from the detective who handled the case suggest that the intruder had been listening to her for. They found a small diary in the crawlspace that contained detailed observations of her daily routine and her late. The state records show that the diary was written in a cramped and messy style that was very difficult for. Some locals claimed that the handwriting matched the signature on an old lease agreement from the early 2009. The county file from 2015 remains one of the most requested documents in the local history department of the. People are fascinated by the idea of someone living so close without being detected by the person who lives in. Investigators never confirmed if there are other houses in the neighborhood that have similar hidden spaces or secret rooms in. The dispatch logs from that era show a significant increase in calls regarding suspicious activity in the historic district of. Sarah Miller has since become an advocate for home security, and she often gives lectures on the importance of checking. She doesn't believe in ghosts, but she knows that people can be much more dangerous than any supernatural entity from. The state records show that she has patented a new type of motion sensor that can detect vibrations inside the pus. Her goal is to ensure that no one else has to experience the sound of the breathing speaking back to. The mystery of the man in the walls continues to haunt the quiet streets of Savannah during the long Every time a floorboard creaks or a vent rattles, the residents wonder if they are truly alone in their own. The archived notes from the case remain in a box in the basement of the police station for anyone to... It's a story that serves as a warning for those who think that their home is a fortress against the point. The final report from the county sheriff was filed in 2022, and it officially labeled the case as investigators never confirmed the location of the man who fled into the woods on that night of October 14th in. Records conflict regarding the sightings in the nearby towns, but most believe that he moved on to a different state. Sarah Miller's old house stands as a silent witness to the events that transpired within its wooden frames so long. The current residents have installed thick carpets to muffle the sounds of the floorboards that Sarah once listened to, so county files from 2009 suggest that many older homes in the area possess similar structural anomalies and hidden. Investigators never confirmed if the squatter had access to the electrical system or the water pipes during his long stay. The state records from 2023 show that the neighborhood has seen a decrease in reported prowler incidents since then. However, the archived notes of the original detective contain a warning that some cases are never truly settled. By the dispatch logs from that night in 2021 are still used as a training tool for new emergency call. They illustrate the importance of staying calm while a caller is facing a potentially life-threatening situation in their own. The story of the breathing in the hallway remains a staple of local folklore in the coastal city of Savannah. Some locals claimed that the intruder was not a squatter but a former owner who couldn't bear to leave his. Investigators never confirmed this theory because the physical evidence collected at the scene did not point to any specific historical. The county file from 2015 is often cited in discussions about property rights and the safety of modern residential. Records conflict on the total number of days the intruder spent living inside the crawlspace before he was finally. Some experts believe it was over 6 months, while others suggest it was only a few weeks of total time. Sarah Miller reportedly still keeps a light on in her hallway every single night, regardless of where she is currently. The archived notes from her therapy sessions indicate that the sound of breathing is a trigger for her deep-seated. State records show that she has not returned to the city of Savannah since the day she packed her last. The dispatch logs for that specific address have been flagged to ensure a rapid response if any future calls are. No one has ever heard the voice speak back again since that night in 2021 in the historic. The wooden floors continue to settle, and the wind continues to whistle through the gaps in the old Victorian structure. The county file from 2015 is now digitally archived to prevent the physical document from being lost or destroyed. Investigators never confirmed if the holes in the floor were used for anything other than observation during the long nights. Records conflict on whether the intruder was armed at the time of his escape into the dark woods behind the mystery of the breathing remains a chilling chapter in the life of a woman who just wanted to work. Archived notes from the neighbors suggest that they noticed a strange smell coming from the property during the summer months. They reportedly thought it was a plumbing issue or perhaps a problem with the local sewage system in the old. The state records indicate that no environmental hazards were found when the house was inspected after the reported incident in. Dispatch logs from 2021 show that Sarah had called twice before about strange noises in the middle of. Investigators never confirmed if those earlier calls were related to the man living in the crawlspace under her. Some locals claimed that they saw a light flickering in the attic when Sarah was away on a business trip. The county file from 2015 does not include any photos of the intruder, but it does have many sketches. These sketches show a thin man with long hair and a beard who appeared to be in his late. Records conflict on whether he was seen at a local grocery store or a library in the weeks before. The archived notes of the case are now a part of a larger study on residential security in the Plaisance. Sarah Miller's business continues to thrive in Atlanta, but she never takes on projects that require her to work. She doesn't like to be alone in large buildings or houses that have more than one floor or a... The state records show that she has invested in several security firms that specialize in the detection of hidden Her goal remains the same as it was on that night in Savannah, which is to stay safe, and the dispatch logs from 2021 are a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the most. The breathing in the hallway was not a ghost, but a man who had decided to make himself a dead. Investigators never confirmed what he said to Sarah before the line went dead and the silence of the night. The county file from 2015 remains closed to the public unless a special request is made to the records conflict on the final outcome of the investigation, but the story lives on in the minds of the. Sarah Miller is safe now, but she will never forget the night the breathing spoke back to her in this news story. The last playback was reviewed almost a year after the building was sealed, during a routine audit meant to confirm that older cases had been properly closed. What investigators heard during that review did not match the original written summary, and the difference could not be ignored. The location was a municipal maintenance depot near a river crossing, positioned between a freight highway and an aging concrete bridge used by local traffic. The depot had been closed following a limited electrical fire during early winter, and no injuries were reported. The fire caused minimal structural damage and was officially ruled accidental within 2 days of inspection. Inspectors attributed the cause to degraded wiring inside an exterior control panel that had exceeded its service life. Rowan Klein was assigned to the follow-up audit at the state level. He was 42 years old and worked as a senior fire marshal, specializing in industrial safety and post-incident verification. Rowan had handled dozens of similar cases during his career. Most audits were procedural and ended once documentation aligned with the original conclusions. That morning, Rowan expected nothing more than administrative closure. His task was to verify archived audio recordings, confirm timestamps, and finalize the case file for long-term storage. The depot sat several miles outside the nearest town, surrounded by flat land, scrub grass, and utility access roads. The nearby river moved slowly, swollen from seasonal rain, but quiet that time of year. When Rowan arrived, the weather was cold and overcast. The building appeared neglected rather than damaged, with faded paint, rusted fixtures, and warning signs still posted on the fence. Burn marks remained visible near the exterior electrical panel. They were contained, shallow, and consistent with the original report. Inside, the control office was dim and silent. Dust-coated desks and shelves and a faint odor of soot lingered in the air. Chairs were pushed slightly away from desks as if left mid-task, though nothing was officially documented as disturbed. Paperwork remained stacked neatly in trays. Mounted against one wall was the digital recording unit, an older continuous audio system installed years earlier. It captured sound only, with no video feed or motion sensors. Rowan photographed the equipment carefully, documenting cable routing, power sources, and serial numbers. He avoided disturbing unnecessary components to preserve integrity. Although his office already possessed duplicate copies of the recordings, Rowan preferred original media whenever possible. He removed the hard drive, sealed it, and logged the transfer. Back at the regional office, Rowan met with 2 analysts assigned to evidence verification. Maribel Voss specialized in audio review, while Ethan Crow handled metadata validation and system logs. They loaded the drive into a clean workstation isolated from external networks. Each step followed documented chain of custody procedures. The first several hours of audio revealed nothing unusual. The recordings captured low electrical hums, distant highway traffic, and occasional radio chatter from maintenance staff. Voices matched known employees listed on shift logs. Background noise levels remained stable and predictable. Rowan listened carefully, noting the familiarity of routine industrial sounds. Everything aligned with the initial conclusion of an accidental incident. Near the end of the timeline, an alarm tone sounded briefly at 11:47 p.m. The tone was sharp, mechanical, and lasted less than 2 seconds. Immediately afterward, the audio dropped into what appeared to be a silent gap. System logs marked a brief power fluctuation at that moment. The gap lasted just under 10 seconds before ambient noise resumed. Ethan flagged the timestamp for reference and prepared to move on. Rowan noticed the waveform was not flat during the gap. There was faint movement suggesting recorded activity rather than true silence. He asked MrBallen to replay the segment at standard volume without enhancement or filtering. The room remained quiet as the clip played. At first, only faint static could be heard. Then, a subtle sound emerged, resembling slow breathing close to the microphone. The sound was controlled and rhythmic. It did not fluctuate like wind, vibration, or electrical interference. The breathing lasted several seconds, then cut off abruptly. The system returned to ambient noise without transition. MrBallen replayed the clip again to confirm consistency. The sound repeated exactly, with no variation in timing or intensity. Ethan suggested interference caused by unstable power. Rowan requested comparison with other static segments from earlier recordings. They reviewed multiple gaps recorded earlier that month. None contained the same pattern or rhythm. MrBallen adjusted the gain slightly while documenting the change. This revealed an additional detail previously unnoticed. Following the breathing, 3 soft taps could be heard. They were evenly spaced and deliberate. The taps sounded close, like contact against glass or thin metal, not distant or echoed. Then the audio dropped out again. Rowan requested personnel records for that night. According to logs, no one was scheduled after 8 p.m. Badge access records confirmed no entries or exits after closing. Exterior cameras showed no vehicles approaching the site. Rowan contacted the local fire chief to confirm responder observations. The chief stated the building was empty upon arrival. No signs of forced entry were documented. Doors and windows were intact and secured. The team replayed the clip again at normal speed. Rowan noticed the breathing paused briefly between taps. The pattern felt intentional, though no one stated this aloud. The room remained quiet longer than usual. Ethan reviewed system diagnostics again. No mechanical components activated during that window. MrBallen suggested checking other recordings from nearby sources to rule out coincidence. Rowan requested emergency dispatch logs. A traffic incident had been reported near the river crossing minutes after the depot alarm. The call was archived with standard retention. During playback, the caller described seeing smoke near the maintenance building. Road noise filled most of the background. Beneath the noise, faint tapping could be heard. It was subtle, but present. MrBallen isolated the sound without altering pitch. The rhythm matched the depot recording. Investigators compared timestamps and confirmed overlap within seconds, accounting for transmission delay. Rowan expanded the investigation, requesting archived recordings from the previous 6 months at the depot. Several minor anomalies appeared, too faint to notice during routine reviews. In each case, the sounds were dismissed during initial logging as ambient interference. Now, with context, they appeared structured. Short pauses, faint exhales, and soft contact sounds repeated sporadically. Rowan interviewed maintenance staff who had worked late shifts at the depot over the past year. One technician recalled hearing tapping noises late at night while closing alone. At the time, it was blamed on cooling metal or wildlife near the windows. Another worker mentioned the recording system sometimes picked up breathing sounds during quiet hours. They assumed it was air pressure changes inside the office during temperature shifts. Rowan reviewed environmental data from those nights. Temperature changes were gradual and consistent. Pressure shifts could not explain the rhythmic nature of the sounds. The investigation widened to include maintenance logs and repair requests. Several entries mentioned unexplained system activations during off hours. None were escalated because no alarms or damage followed. Rowan documented each finding carefully using cautious and neutral language. No evidence suggested criminal activity, tampering, or unauthorized access. No missing persons were linked to the site or surrounding area. The fire itself remained clearly accidental. Rowan returned to the depot for a second site inspection, this time alone. He stood in the control office, listening to the ambient silence. The room felt unchanged, yet different in ways he could not quantify. He noted the placement of the microphone near the window. It was positioned to capture interior sounds clearly while dampening external noise. Rowan requested structural analysis of the window frames and surrounding walls. Engineers confirmed the glass could transmit sound internally under certain conditions. However, no external source could account for the breathing pattern. Rowan requested body camera footage from the first responder who entered the building that night. During the initial sweep, the microphone captured a brief inhale sound. At the time, it was attributed to the responder breathing behind protective gear. When isolated and compared, the sound matched the depot recording closely. Investigators slowed the clip slightly without altering pitch. The match remained consistent. The sound originated inside the control office. Rowan requested forensic audio analysis from an independent laboratory. The lab confirmed the sound exhibited characteristics of human respiration. They could not identify a specific source or individual. No echo patterns suggested mechanical origin. The taps showed controlled spacing, inconsistent with random impact. The lab noted the sounds were captured at close proximity to the microphone. Rowan included the findings in an internal appendix marked restricted. The appendix avoided interpretation and focused on verifiable observations. Years passed without further incidents at the site. The depot remained sealed and scheduled for eventual demolition. Before demolition approval, the recordings were reviewed one final time. Advanced software confirmed the earlier findings without alteration. The sounds remained isolated to brief windows. No additional anomalies were discovered. The final playback remained unchanged. Rowan submitted his closing report using careful language. He noted unexplained human-like audio during periods of confirmed vacancy. He avoided speculation and conclusions. The case was officially closed. Internally, the file remained flagged for reference. Those who listened to the playback described it as quiet but unsettling. There was no panic or urgency in the sound. It did not ask for help. It did not speak. It only breathed and knocked. The case left behind no answers, only a recording that did not belong, and a final playback that investigators never forgot. In this new story, the receipt looked harmless when it first surfaced, yet several investigators later agreed that it marked the quiet beginning of a hidden pattern. The small paper slip, dated to 1999, carried a printed timestamp and a room number that no longer existed on any current layout. The motel had been operating for decades along a worn highway that travelers used only when storms forced them off the main route. Locals considered the building unremarkable, yet subtle discrepancies in old records suggested something had operated quietly inside its walls for many years. A 30-year-old researcher named Darren Kessler arrived at the motel after receiving a private package from a retired deputy who once worked nearby. Darren specialized in overlooked regional cases that involved missing travelers or abandoned structures. He believed that forgotten records often revealed threads ignored during earlier investigations. The deputy's package included the faded receipt and a short note claiming that the motel had repeatedly produced irregular logs during the late 1990s. The note added that one guest connected to the receipt disappeared shortly after her stay. Darren understood that the discrepancies deserved careful review because small clerical errors rarely repeated across multiple years without cause. Darren checked into the motel under the pretense of documenting roadside architecture for a travel study. The manager, a quiet man named Roderick Slate, offered polite conversation while handing over a brass key tagged with a faded plastic marker. Roderick explained that the motel remained slow during winter because the highway offered better travel conditions toward the coast. Darren observed the lobby carefully and noted worn carpet, outdated brochures stacked near the door, and a guest log that appeared newer than the rest of the furnishings. The placement of the log suggested frequent handling, yet the pages looked clean and recently replaced. He walked through the hallway and counted each door while noting the spacing. The building map he reviewed earlier listed 18 rooms on the main floor. The hallway, however, showed only 17. The missing room number matched the one printed on the old receipt. This detail alerted him because renovated buildings usually retained visible framing marks even after heavy construction. Darren pressed his hand lightly against the wall near the end of the hall and felt a faint vibration that suggested hollow space behind the surface. He measured the wall sections using a pocket tool and confirmed that the section between two existing rooms was wider than necessary. Darren returned to his room and laid out the materials. The receipt listed a guest named Sarah Knott, who reportedly traveled alone while heading toward a coastal community. Sarah disappeared in early 2000, and her case remained unresolved. The deputy's note stated that Sarah's receipt did not match the daily log, which claimed no such guest arrived that night. The mismatch concerned Darren because the receipt carried accurate tax amounts and aligned with motel pricing from that period. He wondered why the manager at the time recorded no entry while producing a receipt that appeared legitimate. He began comparing renovation permits filed in 2004 that mentioned adjustments to plumbing and minor structural changes. None referenced wall removal or room elimination. Another document from 1993 described a storage closet positioned near the East Hall that aligned closely with the missing room. The inconsistency implied that the building quietly changed between recorded inspections. Darren suspected that the missing space once served a purpose hidden from routine oversight. The location matched earlier accounts involving unlogged visitors who traveled through the area under unclear circumstances. The first significant clue appeared when Darren examined faint scrape marks near the baseboard beside the uneven wall segment. The marks indicated that heavy objects or carts had been pushed repeatedly along that stretch. He followed the marks toward a small utility room and found two maintenance carts. One looked newer, while the other appeared decades old. Dust patterns on the older cart suggested recent movement. The wheels displayed residue matching the scrape marks in the hallway. Darren photographed them and continued searching for more indicators that the space behind the wall had been accessed often. Later that afternoon, he spoke casually with Roderick about the motel's history. Roderick insisted that the hallway had always held 17 rooms and that older maps likely contained misprints. His unease became visible when Darren asked about staff changes from prior decades. Roderick's voice stiffened as he explained that most former employees moved away years earlier. Darren sensed guarded behavior that aligned with the deputy's warning that the motel had produced numerous irregular logs. The conversation strengthened his suspicion that the missing room had been intentionally concealed rather than structurally removed. Darren reviewed archived case interviews involving travelers who stayed near the time of Sarah's disappearance. Several mentioned hearing movement at night near the far end of the hallway. One traveler described a sound resembling a door closing, even though she believed no door existed in that area. Another reported seeing a maintenance cart near the hallway corner during early dawn, despite no scheduled service. Darren recorded these accounts in his notebook and saw how they aligned with the scraped baseboard and hidden seam behind the wallpaper. He waited until the hallway quieted that night before positioning his ear against the uneven section. A faint, rhythmic hum pulsed through the wall. The sound reminded him of old air circulation units that operated behind sealed spaces. He tapped the wallpaper lightly and heard a hollow echo that confirmed empty space inside. He located a subtle vertical line in the wallpaper pattern. The misalignment appeared intentional because the rest of the wall displayed smooth continuity. The line suggested a concealed frame beneath several layers of paint. The next phase of his investigation focused on the receipt itself. He studied the timestamp and noted that it occurred roughly 30 minutes before the handwritten time in the log from that night. This meant that Sarah likely checked in privately, received a printed receipt, and entered the building without documentation in the official record. Such a process would have placed her inside the hidden room where no other guests would observe her arrival. The discovery strengthened the theory that the motel had maintained a quiet trap, allowing certain visitors to remain unrecorded. Early the next morning, Darren contacted the retired deputy for further clarification. The deputy explained that he once interviewed a former cleaner who claimed the motel held a restricted room used only by select staff members. The cleaner left the job shortly before Sarah vanished. She told the deputy that the room contained minimal furnishings and a separate lock system that engaged from the hallway. She believed the room served as an unofficial holding area when staff needed privacy for guests who paid without leaving a record. Her statement aligned with the mismatched logs and the receipt's existence. Darren walked through the hallway again and placed a small temperature sensor near the hidden seam. The reading dropped a few degrees beyond the hallway baseline. This confirmed airflow movement consistent with a closed space behind the wall. He pressed his hand against the wallpaper and applied steady pressure. The surface flexed slightly and revealed a faint metallic outline beneath the paint. The structural renovations likely attempted to disguise the original door rather than remove it entirely. He suspected that additional reinforcement blocked internal access yet preserved the cavity. He prepared a detailed set of notes and photographed every relevant feature. He then cross-referenced the timeline of Sierra's travel using diner receipts and gas station logs. Her last confirmed sighting placed her near the highway exit only hours before the timestamp on the motel receipt. Darren compared this with the record from the deputy, stating that her backpack was discovered weeks later near a drainage path adjacent to the motel fence. The connection strengthened the idea that Sarah reached the motel and entered a room that did not exist on paper. As the day progressed, Darren examined the property's exterior. The east side showed uneven siding that hinted at past repairs. He found a patch of foundation that contained newer concrete compared to surrounding sections. The difference suggested reinforcement added to stabilize a sealed interior space. The position aligned precisely with the hidden room's estimated location. He also found rusted nails scattered near the siding that matched older construction materials described in earlier renovation paperwork. The discovery deepened when Darren noticed a small vent near ground level. The vent's opening faced a narrow strip of weeds that blocked visibility from the parking area. He crouched carefully and listened to the airflow passing through. The sound matched the low hum he heard from inside the hallway. The vent confirmed that the sealed room maintained internal ventilation, which supported the idea that the space remained functional long after official documentation erased its existence. He returned to his room and organized his findings into a chronological structure designed for submission to a regional review board. His summary argued that the motel operated a concealed room used for unrecorded occupancy. The room allowed staff to admit guests privately without leaving evidence in routine logs. The receipt exposed the process because it proved that one such guest entered the building using a transaction not reflected in the registry. He concluded that the trap emerged from a combination of secrecy, inconsistent oversight, and a physical space built to hide interactions. To strengthen the report, Darren analyzed guest logs from 1997 through 2000. He noted repeated gaps during nights when occupancy should have increased due to storms or highway closures. He also observed several shifts where the same staff signature repeated across multiple days without variation. These consistent patterns implied deliberate control over entries rather than organic record-keeping. The trapped guests likely entered through arrangements handled by select employees assigned to nighttime shifts. The twist unfolded when Darren realized that earlier investigators probably failed to make this connection because they lacked the receipt that proved Sarah's presence. Without written proof, her disappearance looked detached from the motel. The deputy preserved the receipt privately because he believed the case needed further review. That decision allowed Darren to uncover the trap years later. The concealed room and the irregular logs formed a pattern that only became clear when the receipt surfaced with the correct timestamp. Darren submitted his report to local authorities and requested structural access to confirm the interior conditions. Engineers removed part of the hallway panel under supervision and discovered a narrow chamber containing remnants of a mattress frame, wood fragments, and a broken lamp. Dust patterns indicated that the room had been used sporadically even after renovations. No personal belongings remained, yet the evidence proved that the space held occupants. The findings supported Darren's theory that unlogged visitors entered the chamber through the disguised door. Roderick attempted to argue that the room served as an old storage area, but engineers disproved this explanation by identifying electrical wiring for a private light switch. The wiring matched older layouts for guest rooms rather than utility closets. Authorities then compared the wiring with documents from 1987 and found a direct match. This confirmed that the space originally operated as Room 18 before later concealment. When the investigation concluded, the motel closed for additional inspection. Darren left with an understanding that simple documents often carry warning signs overlooked by those who trust official records too easily. The receipt revealed a truth that hid silently within the motel's structure for decades. The quiet trap operated through secrecy, misdirection, and reliance on the assumption that no one would question a missing room on a faded map. Darren recognized that many forgotten buildings hold similar secrets, waiting for someone patient enough to follow a trace left behind on a small slip of paper. In this new story, security records confirm that the final audio tape from the night guard was recorded during a period when the facility was officially empty, unpowered, and scheduled for permanent closure. The facility sat at the far edge of an industrial zone that never reached its intended growth. Half-built warehouses surrounded it, their steel frames rusting under years of exposure. Access roads were cracked and uneven, and most streetlights no longer worked. During daylight hours, the building looked abandoned. At night, it felt deliberately erased. The structure had been completed in the late 1980s as a regional materials testing center. It housed industrial stress frames, vibration chambers, and long-term endurance testing equipment used by manufacturing firms across the state. For years, the facility ran quietly. Engineers worked daytime shifts, logging data and monitoring machines. At night, security guards walked empty corridors, listening to ventilation fans and the distant hum of active equipment. By 2009, contracts dried up. Funding vanished. Equipment was sold, transferred, or scrapped. Most staff were reassigned or retired. The closure plan unfolded slowly. First, testing operations stopped. Then, utilities were shut down in stages. Power was cut to most sections. Water lines were drained. Only minimal emergency lighting remained, powered by a backup system scheduled for removal. By early 2010, the facility was officially inactive. No experiments, no staff, no authorized overnight work. Despite that, county regulations required a contracted security presence until demolition planning was finalized. 1 guard per night. Hourly patrol loops. A written log and an end-of-shift recording. The guard assigned to the final rotation was Nolan Virek, age 41. Nolan had worked security for more than a decade. He preferred night shifts and low-traffic sites. He was known as reliable, quiet, and careful with procedures. He had worked at the facility for 3 months by the time of the incident. He knew the layout well enough to navigate without thinking. On a Tuesday night in mid-February, Nolan reported for duty at 10 p.m. The air was cold but clear, and the industrial zone was silent. He signed the logbook, checked the patrol schedule, and powered on the tape recorder used for nightly reports. The recorder was old but dependable. A cassette-based unit bolted to the desk. Digital systems had been removed months earlier, but the tape recorder remained because the contract required a physical audio record. Nolan began the tape with routine information: date, time, weather conditions, facility status. His voice sounded normal, calm, slightly tired. The first patrol loop was uneventful. Empty hallways, locked labs, darkened offices. Emergency lights glowed dimly in long corridors. Nolan noted a flickering light in the west wing, but attributed it to aging batteries. He mentioned it briefly on the tape. On the second patrol, Nolan noticed something off. An interior access door leading to a testing bay was not fully closed. The door stood open by a few inches. That door should have been locked. Nolan checked the latch. It was intact. No damage. No sign of forced entry. He closed the door firmly, tested the handle, and continued his patrol. He marked the door in his notebook and planned to check it again on the next loop. Back in the security office, Nolan added a note to the tape. He described the door and said he would monitor it. The tape continued recording as he resumed his rounds. On the third patrol, Nolan heard a sound he could not immediately identify. It was low and metallic, like something shifting under pressure. He stopped walking and listened. The sound came again, deeper inside the building. Nolan called out, identifying himself as security. His voice echoed through the corridor. There was no response. He checked the nearest emergency phone. It was dead, as expected. Nolan continued, but his pace slowed. The air felt colder, even though the external temperature had not changed. When he reached the testing bay door again, it was open. wider than before. Nolan stood still for several seconds, listening. The metallic sound came again, followed by a faint vibration under his boots. He stepped inside the bay. The room was large, with a high ceiling and concrete floor. Most equipment had been removed months earlier, leaving only anchor points and dust outlines. In the center of the bay stood one machine that had not been dismantled, a massive pressure frame bolted into the floor. It was supposed to be inactive and unpowered. A red indicator light glowed faintly on its control panel. Nolan approached slowly. He reached out and touched the panel. It was warm. He stepped back immediately. Nolan left the bay and returned to the security office. His movements were controlled, but his breathing had changed. He spoke directly into the tape now, not following the usual format. He described the red light, the warmth, and the fact that the machine should not have power. He checked the facility power map pinned to the wall. The testing bay was listed as offline. Nolan attempted to contact his contract supervisor by radio. No response. He considered leaving the building to call from outside, but protocol required confirming there was no intrusion first. On the fourth patrol, Nolan returned to the testing bay with his flashlight raised. The pressure frame was still warm. The red light was brighter. Now he heard another sound. A rhythmic motion, slow and deliberate, like controlled movement. Nolan described it on the tape as he walked. Then he stopped speaking for several seconds. When his voice returned, it was quieter. He said he could hear something else. Breathing, not his own. Nolan asked if anyone was inside the facility. He identified himself again. The breathing stopped. The red light flickered. Nolan backed toward the door, keeping the machine in view. As he moved, the metallic sound grew louder. The door behind him closed. Nolan did not shout. He said calmly into the tape that the door had shut on its own. He tried the handle. It opened without resistance. He stepped into the corridor and did not return to the bay. Back in the security office, Nolan spoke continuously into the recorder. He repeated details to ensure they were captured. He checked the time. 1:37 a.m. He noted something else that unsettled him. The wall clock above the desk was running again. It had been stopped for weeks. Nolan tried the office phone. No dial tone. He tried the radio again. Static. He decided to end the shift early and leave the facility, documenting everything for morning review. As he gathered his jacket, the lights in the office dimmed, then stabilized. Footsteps echoed down the main hallway. Slow, heavy, measured. Nolan froze. He whispered into the tape that someone was walking inside the building. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. Nolan called out. No response. The door handle moved slightly, then stopped. Nolan said he was unlocking the door to see who was there. The tape recorded the sound of the door opening. Silence followed. After several seconds, Nolan spoke again, confused. He said the hallway was empty. He stepped out anyway. The tape picked up his footsteps moving away from the desk. The recorder continued running unattended. Several minutes passed with only ambient noise. Then Nolan's voice returned, distant and strained. He said he was back in the testing bay. He said he did not remember deciding to go there. The tape captured the metallic sound again, louder now. Nolan said the pressure frame was active. He said the red light was blinking. He described the machine cycling, even though nothing was mounted inside it. Nolan said the digital readout was changing. He tried to read the numbers aloud, then stopped. His breathing became audible on the tape. He said the room felt smaller. He said the walls sounded closer. The tape recorded a loud mechanical engagement followed by a deep vibration. Nolan shouted for the first time. He said the machine had moved. He said it should not be able to move without power. He said something was standing behind him. The tape captured a sharp intake of breath. Nolan whispered that he could hear his own voice echoing back. Delayed. He said the echo was not coming from the walls. There was rapid movement, then a heavy impact. Nolan's voice dropped again. He said he could not see the door. He said the red light was the only thing still on. He said the machine was responding to him. The final portion of the tape was fragmented. Nolan spoke in short sentences, trying to remain calm. He said the facility was not empty. He said it was waiting. His last words were quiet but clear. It's recording me now. After that, the tape continued until it reached the end. In the morning, the day's supervisor arrived to find the facility locked and silent. Nolan's car was still in the parking lot. The security office was empty. The tape recorder sat on the desk, powered off, cassette fully wound. The testing bay was cold. The pressure frame was inactive. There was no red light. Power checks confirmed the building remained offline. A search was conducted, but Nolan was never found. The official report listed the incident as an unexplained disappearance. The facility was sealed permanently 3 days later. The tape was archived and marked restricted. Years later, during a routine evidence audit, a technician replayed the tape using modern equipment. They noticed something not documented in the original report. During the final minutes, beneath Nolan's voice, there was another sound, a second voice. It repeated Nolan's words a fraction of a second after he spoke them, perfectly matched. Still recording, still waiting. A quiet Tuesday evening in Ridgewood turned into something far more unsettling. The local police station buzzed with its usual calm energy. Officers joked about grabbing another cup of coffee before heading home. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Maggie Trent sat at her desk reviewing call logs. She had been working overtime to cover for a colleague on leave. Maggie was 34 years old with dark hair pulled into a loose bun. Her green eyes scanned the screen with practiced efficiency. That night, she planned to finish early so she could pick up her 6-year-old son from his grandmother's house. At 7:45, the silence was broken by an incoming call. The screen displayed an unknown number, which wasn't unusual for this time of night. Maggie answered with her standard greeting, "Ridgewood Police Department, how can I assist you?" What came next sent a chill down her spine. A frantic female voice pleaded for help, claiming to be trapped in a basement. The voice sounded eerily familiar. Maggie froze for a moment, then quickly pulled up the caller ID. The number matched none of the known addresses in Ridgewood. She asked for more details, trying to keep her voice steady. The caller described a dimly lit room with concrete walls and a single window too high to reach. Before Maggie could ask where exactly this was happening, the line went dead. She immediately flagged the call for investigation, but couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the voice belonged to someone she knew. Over the next hour, Maggie replayed the recording multiple times. Each listen deepened her unease. By 9:15, she decided to share the audio with her supervisor, Tom Harris, who agreed something felt off about the whole situation. Tom suggested they cross-reference the voice against past calls in their database. As they worked, Maggie noticed subtle similarities between the caller's tone and her own speech patterns. She dismissed it as stress playing tricks on her mind until Tom pointed out the same observation. They both stared at each other, confused and alarmed. By 10:30, the team had narrowed down possible locations based on the caller's vague description. One address stood out. A vacant house on Maple Street had been boarded up for months. Officers were dispatched to investigate, while Maggie stayed on the line, coordinating efforts from the station. The responding officers reported back within 20 minutes. They found signs of forced entry at the rear of the property, but no immediate evidence of anyone inside. Just as they prepared to leave, one officer spotted fresh footprints leading to a hidden door beneath the porch. Behind it lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Maggie listened intently as the officers descended cautiously. Their flashlights revealed a cluttered basement matching the caller's description perfectly. In the corner sat a dusty old tape recorder, its red light blinking faintly. Beside it lay a note scrawled in hurried handwriting. "Bring this to Maggie Trent," it read. Back at the station, Maggie's hands trembled as she pressed play on the device. Her blood ran cold when she heard her own voice begging for help word for word as earlier that night. The recording ended abruptly, leaving behind a heavy silence. Tom placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, unsure what to say. Investigators later determined the tape recorder had been rigged to dial emergency services automatically once activated. Whoever set it up knew enough about technology to mimic Maggie's voice convincingly. But why target her specifically remained unclear. Over the following weeks, Maggie became obsessed with uncovering answers. She pored over old case files, searching for any connection to herself or her family. A breakthrough came when she discovered a decades-old missing persons report involving a woman named Claire Harper. Claire bore a striking resemblance to Maggie and vanished without a trace in 1998. Further digging revealed Claire had once lived in the very house on Maple Street. Witness statements from neighbors mentioned strange noises coming from the basement around the time of her disappearance. No one thought much of it back then, assuming she moved away suddenly. Maggie shared her findings with Tom, who arranged for forensic experts to revisit the scene. They uncovered fragments of fabric and hair samples embedded deep in cracks of the concrete floor. DNA testing confirmed these belonged to Claire Harper. It seemed likely she'd been held captive there before meeting an unknown fate. As news spread through Ridgewood, residents whispered about the eerie coincidence linking Maggie to Claire. Some speculated supernatural forces were at play, though authorities maintained a strictly factual approach. For Maggie, closure came not from explanations, but from honoring Claire's memory. She began volunteering at a local shelter for women in crisis, channeling her experience into helping others escape dangerous situations. On quiet nights at the station, Maggie still thought about the chilling message meant just for her. Yet instead of fear, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for being alive, for making a difference, however small. Life in Ridgewood returned to its peaceful rhythm, though stories of the mysterious call lingered like echoes in the hills. And whenever Maggie passed the old house on Maple Street, now demolished, she reminded herself how fragile yet resilient human lives truly are. Maggie's routine slowly returned to normal, but questions lingered in her mind. Why would someone go to such lengths to mimic her voice? Was it a random act or something more personal? She began noticing subtle changes in her daily life. Little things like misplaced objects or unfamiliar cars parked near her house made her uneasy. One evening, while picking up her son from school, Maggie noticed a man watching her from across the street. He wore a hooded sweatshirt and kept his face partially hidden. When she approached him, he quickly turned and walked away. Maggie filed a report with her colleagues, but they found no leads. Weeks later, another strange incident occurred. Maggie received a package at work with no return address. Inside was a photograph of her standing outside the police station. On the back was written a cryptic message. "You hear me now?" Maggie showed the photo to Tom, who immediately called for additional security measures around the station. The department launched an internal investigation focusing on anyone who might have access to their systems or recordings. Suspicion fell on a former technician named Ray, who had been fired months earlier for unauthorized data access. Ray reportedly harbored resentment toward Maggie after she caught him snooping through confidential files. Officers tracked Ray to a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of town. When they arrived, they found his unit empty except for scattered papers and electronic equipment. Among the items was a laptop containing audio files manipulated to sound like Maggie's voice. It seemed Ray had spent months perfecting the technique. Though Ray remained at large, Maggie felt some relief knowing the source of the harassment. The department issued a warrant for his arrest and increased patrols in areas he frequented. Meanwhile, Maggie continued her volunteer work, finding solace in helping others navigate their struggles. Months passed without further incidents. Maggie hoped Ray had left town or given up his vendetta. Then, one rainy afternoon, she received another call at the station. This time, the voice on the line was unmistakably Ray's. He taunted her, saying he enjoyed watching her squirm. He claimed responsibility for everything, including Claire Harper's disappearance. Maggie remained calm despite the chilling confession. She signaled to Tom, who traced the call while keeping Ray engaged in conversation. Within minutes, officers pinpointed his location to an abandoned warehouse downtown. A SWAT team moved in swiftly, apprehending Ray before he could escape. During questioning, Ray admitted to discovering Claire's fate accidentally while exploring the basement years ago. He became fixated on the idea of recreating her plea for help using modern technology. Targeting Maggie was part of his twisted game to see if anyone would notice the parallels between them. With Ray behind bars, Maggie finally felt a sense of peace. She attended therapy sessions to process the trauma and leaned on friends and family for support. The experience strengthened her resolve to continue advocating for victims of violence and abuse. Years later, Maggie reflected on how far she'd come since that fateful night. Though scars remained, she chose to focus on the positive impact she could make in the world. Sometimes during quiet moments, she imagined Claire looking down, smiling, knowing her story hadn't been forgotten. The dispatcher heard her own voice begging for help, but in the end, she found strength in vulnerability. Her journey taught her resilience, empathy, and the importance of community. Life in Ridgewood carried on its gentle rhythm, undisturbed by shadows of the past. Maggie often thought about how close she had come to unraveling under the weight of mystery. Every day brought new challenges, but also opportunities to grow stronger. She remembered the first time she heard the recording of her own voice pleading for help. It haunted her dreams for weeks afterward. Nightmares filled with dark basements and flickering red lights jolted her awake more than once. Tom Harris noticed the toll it took on her. He encouraged her to take time off, but Maggie refused. She felt responsible for solving the puzzle surrounding Claire Harper's disappearance. Her determination only grew stronger with each passing day. She spent countless hours poring over old records and connecting dots that others might have missed. Her son Liam sensed something was wrong too. At 6 years old, he didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew his mom was different. She seemed distracted during bedtime stories and rushed through dinner conversations. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching cartoons, Liam turned to her and said, "Mommy, are you scared?" His innocent question caught her off guard. Maggie hugged him tightly and replied, "No, sweetheart, I'm not scared anymore." It wasn't entirely true, but she wanted to believe it. She realized how important it was to shield him from her fears. Children deserved a safe, happy childhood, free from worry. Determined to provide that for Liam, she vowed to regain control over her emotions. Work became both a refuge and a battleground for Maggie. Each shift brought new calls, new voices reaching out for assistance. Some were mundane requests for directions or noise complaints. Others were heart-wrenching cries for help during domestic disputes or medical emergencies. Through it all, Maggie maintained her composure, channeling her energy into helping others. Her colleagues admired her resilience. They rallied around her, offering support whenever needed. Officer Ramirez often stopped by her desk with updates on the ongoing investigation into Ray's activities. Detective Alvarez shared insights gleaned from interviews with former associates of Ray's. Even Captain Lewis checked in periodically, ensuring Maggie wasn't overwhelmed by the pressure. Despite their best efforts, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Rumors circulated about Ray's motives and methods. Some believed he acted alone, driven by obsession and revenge. Others speculated he had accomplices lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. No one knew for sure which theory held water. Maggie tried to stay focused on facts rather than speculation. She reviewed archived footage from security cameras near the police station. Grainy images showed glimpses of a figure resembling Ray lingering in alleyways and parking lots. Timestamps aligned with periods when mysterious events occurred. These discoveries bolstered her confidence in pursuing justice. Meanwhile, reports surfaced linking Ray to similar incidents elsewhere. Dispatchers in neighboring towns described receiving eerie calls featuring manipulated voices mimicking their own. Patterns emerged, suggesting a pattern of behavior stretching back several years. Authorities collaborated, sharing information and resources to build a comprehensive profile of the suspect. Public awareness heightened as media outlets picked up the story. Headlines blared warnings urging citizens to remain vigilant. Tips poured in from concerned residents hoping to aid the investigation. While most leads proved fruitless, a few offered valuable clues guiding investigators closer to capturing Ray. Throughout this ordeal, Maggie clung to hope. She drew inspiration from stories of survival and triumph against adversity. Books, documentaries, even casual conversations with coworkers provided reminders of human resilience. Each example reinforced her belief that good ultimately prevails over evil. On weekends, Maggie sought solace in nature. She took long walks along wooded trails, breathing in fresh air and soaking up sunshine. Birds chirped overhead, leaves rustled softly in the breeze. These simple pleasures grounded her, restoring balance to her chaotic life. Occasionally, Liam joined her, skipping stones across ponds or chasing butterflies through meadows. Nature's beauty reminded Maggie of life's fragility and preciousness. She cherished every moment spent outdoors, appreciating the world around her. Evenings at home were equally restorative. Cooking meals, experimenting with recipes, baking cookies with Liam created a sense of normalcy. Laughter filled the kitchen as flour-dusted countertops and sweet aromas wafted through the air. Friends played a crucial role in Maggie's recovery process. Sarah, a fellow dispatcher, invited her over for movie nights and game evenings. They laughed until tears streamed down their faces, temporarily forgetting worries. Mark, an old college buddy, dropped by, unexpectedly bearing gifts of wine and sympathy. Conversations flowed easily, bridging gaps created by distance and time. Support networks expanded beyond immediate circles. Online forums connected Maggie with individuals facing similar challenges. Shared experiences fostered camaraderie and understanding. Virtual hugs and words of encouragement uplifted spirits, reminding participants they weren't alone. Together, they navigated paths toward healing and renewal. Professionally, Maggie embraced opportunities for growth and learning. Workshops, seminars, webinars introduced her to cutting-edge technologies, enhancing emergency response capabilities. Training exercises simulated real-world scenarios, preparing teams for anything thrown their way. Knowledge empowered her, boosting confidence and competence. Leadership skills blossomed as Maggie stepped up during critical moments. She coordinated multi-agency responses, managed crises calmly and efficiently, communicated clearly under pressure. Recognition followed acknowledgement of her dedication and hard work. Awards, plaques, certificates adorned her office walls, symbols of achievement earned through perseverance. Yet, amid accolades, Maggie never lost sight of her primary mission to serve and protect. Every call mattered, regardless of circumstance. Lives hung in the balance, dependent upon swift, decisive action. Compassion, empathy, integrity guided her interactions, ensuring callers felt heard, valued, supported. Reflecting on her journey, Maggie recognized transformation within herself. From frightened dispatcher shaken by inexplicable occurrences to poised professional capable of handling whatever came next. Challenges tested, limits pushed boundaries, forged character. Lessons learned shaped perspectives, influenced decisions. Ultimately, Maggie emerged stronger, wiser, grateful for lessons imparted along the way. She acknowledged vulnerabilities, embraced strengths, celebrated victories big and small. Resilience defined her legacy, inspiring others to persevere despite obstacles. Hope remained steadfast, beacon illuminating darkest corners, guiding footsteps forward. Ridgewood thrived as a tight-knit community bound by shared experiences. Residents looked out for one another, fostering connections, strengthening ties. Stories passed down generations, preserved history, honored memories. Traditions endured, evolving, adapting, reflecting, changing times, yet retaining core values. For Maggie, belonging meant everything. Roots anchored, deeply intertwined with those around her. Bonds formed unbreakable links, creating safety nets, catching falls, preventing isolation. Together, they weathered storms, celebrated triumphs, mourned losses. United, they stood resilient, unyielding, hopeful. In this new story, county emergency archives show a pattern of distress signals originating from a remote cabin every winter, despite the structure having no electricity, no occupants, and no confirmed power source for decades. The cabin sat deep in the northern forest of Blackwater County, far beyond maintained roads and seasonal trails. The area was dense with pine, uneven ground, and narrow ravines that filled with snowdrifts each winter. Even experienced rangers avoided the region once heavy snowfall began. The structure was built in the 1970s as a temporary ranger shelter. It was meant to support short patrols during wildfire season and wildlife surveys during mild weather. The design was basic: one main room, a storage alcove, a small wood stove, a wall-mounted emergency radio. That radio was never connected to the electrical grid. The cabin had no buried lines, no generator hookup, and no solar equipment. When it was operational, rangers brought portable generators for short stays. By 2003, the forestry department shut the cabin down. Budget cuts eliminated seasonal patrols in that sector, and inspections found early signs of rot in the floor supports. The windows were boarded from the outside, the door was padlocked with a state-issued lock, the trail leading to the site was removed from maintenance schedules and later erased from public maps. Officially, the cabin was no longer usable and no longer part of active infrastructure. It existed only as a marker in old forestry record. Hunters and longtime locals still knew where it was, but few ever visited. In winter, reaching it required hours of travel by snowmobile through unstable terrain, with no reliable landmarks. The first unexplained distress signal appeared late in December of 2010. It came in during a night shift at the Blackwater County Emergency Communications Center. The alert did not include voice audio. It registered as an automated emergency ping, similar to an emergency beacon activation. The signal lasted under 30 seconds and ended cleanly. The coordinates pointed to a location flagged as inactive. The dispatcher on duty assumed it was a system glitch or an outdated map reference. The alert was logged and closed without response. 3 weeks later, during a heavy snowstorm, the same signal appeared again. Same coordinates, same duration, same classification. That second alert caught the attention of Callum Price, age 39, a night shift dispatcher who specialized in rural coverage. Callum had grown up in the county and recognized the coordinate name instantly. He checked the system history and saw that the location matched the closed ranger cabin. He added an internal note suggesting the possibility of a drifting beacon or mapping error. The shift supervisor reviewed the note and agreed no response was required. Travel conditions were dangerous, and the site was not supposed to be active. When spring arrived, the alerts stopped completely. The following winter, they returned. In December of 2011, 2 identical distress pings appeared within 4 weeks. Both occurred during severe snowfall. Both lasted less than a minute. Callum documented them carefully, adding timestamps, weather conditions, and signal strength observations. Still, no response was authorized. In 2012, the pattern repeated again. Late December, mid-January, early February, always during storms, always from the same coordinates. By then, Callum felt uneasy. He began keeping a personal notebook, tracking every detail about the alerts that the official system did not require. The signal strength varied slightly with each transmission, as if the source struggled to maintain a connection through interference. In March of 2013, after winter conditions eased, County Emergency Management approved a site inspection. A forestry patrol was assigned once snow travel was safe. The team included Ellis Rourke, age 46, a veteran ranger with over 15 years of experience in winter navigation. Reaching the site took nearly 3 hours by snowmobile. When Ellis arrived, the cabin looked exactly as it should have. The boards on the windows were weathered but intact. The padlock was rusted but unbroken. Snow piled against the walls with no signs of disturbance. Ellis cut the padlock and entered. Inside, the air was stale and bitterly cold. There were no footprints, no bedding, no food, and no signs of recent use. The emergency radio was still mounted on the wall near the door. It was unplugged, coated in dust, and showed no signs of tampering. Ellis confirmed there was no generator, no fuel, no batteries, and no wiring hidden behind the walls or floor. The patrol documented everything and left. The official report concluded there was no active signal source at the site. The next winter, the signals returned. In December of 2013, 3 distress pings appeared within 2 weeks. One lasted nearly 90 seconds, longer than any before. Callum escalated the issue to County IT. He requested a deeper technical review of the signal signature. IT confirmed the transmissions were genuine. They were not system echoes, duplicates, or delayed packets. The signal did not match any modern emergency beacon. It followed an older transmission pattern associated with obsolete radio equipment. In January of 2014, one alert lasted nearly 3 minutes. During that time, the signal strength rose and fell rhythmically. Callum watched the bar fluctuate, as if something was adjusting position or power output in real time. Emergency management debated dispatching a response, but delayed due to avalanche risk and whiteout conditions. Before weather improved, the signal ended abruptly. In December of 2014, the alerts returned earlier than usual. The first appeared on December 8th. 2 days later, another alert triggered a secondary system flag. This time, the system identified modulation consistent with potential voice transmission. IT extracted the raw data stream. There was no clear speech, but the modulation resembled breath patterns or movement near a microphone. Emergency management authorized another site visit despite the risks. Ellis volunteered again, joined by a second ranger equipped with thermal imaging and satellite communication. They reached the cabin at dusk during active snowfall. As they approached, Ellis noticed something new. A faint red light flickered briefly behind one of the boarded windows. It vanished before he could confirm it. They cut the padlock and entered. Inside, the emergency radio was connected to a cable. The cable ran behind loose paneling and disappeared beneath the floor. They traced it to a sealed metal box embedded in the foundation. Inside was a battery pack. The batteries were corroded, frozen, and expired by more than 10 years. According to their markings, they should not have held any charge. While the Rangers watched, the radio powered on briefly. The indicator glowed red, then went dark. Ellis documented everything and removed the battery pack for analysis. No footprints were found outside. Snow depth suggested no recent approach. The signal stopped again in early February. County officials debated removing the radio entirely. Legal concerns about altering state property delayed action. The following winter, the signals returned again. This time, the first alert occurred on the exact anniversary of the cabin's closure date. Callum noticed the coincidence and documented it carefully. In January of 2015, one distress signal included a short encoded data burst. IT analyzed the timing and identified it as Morse code. The decoded message was short and repeated twice. Help still here. Emergency management classified the situation as a high-priority anomaly. A joint inspection team was assembled once conditions allowed. It included forestry officials, emergency management staff, and a county engineer. When they arrived, the cabin door was unlocked. Inside, the emergency radio was powered on. The cable ran into the floor, but the metal box beneath was empty. There were no batteries, no generator, no power source. Thermal scans showed no heat signatures. Ground scans showed no buried lines. As the team approached, the radio shut itself off. They removed the radio unit and transported it to a secured county facility. For the remainder of that winter, no distress signals appeared. Officials believed the issue resolved. In December of 2016, the first distress signal returned. Same coordinates, same classification, same duration. Callum stared at the screen in disbelief. The radio was still in evidence storage. IT confirmed the signal origin again matched the cabin location. This time, the alert included brief voice audio. The audio lasted under 10 seconds. A strained human voice whispered 2 words: "Too cold." A response team was dispatched immediately. They reached the cabin before dawn. The door was locked. Fresh snow showed no tracks. Inside, the radio unit was gone. In its place was a smaller device mounted to the same wall. The device was unfamiliar and not listed in any county inventory. It was removed and secured. After that winter, the distress signals stopped permanently. The cabin was demolished the following summer. The site was cleared, and the coordinates were removed from emergency systems. Years later, during a system-wide audit, an archived alert was discovered. It predated the cabin's construction by nearly 20 years. The alert originated from the same coordinates. It carried the same signal signature. There was no explanation attached. Only a timestamp, a location, and a brief note. Signal received. Source unverified. Since the cabin's removal, no further alerts have appeared. But every winter, when heavy snow blankets the county, dispatchers still glance at the archived coordinates. They say emergency systems remember places long after people forget them. And sometimes, something keeps calling even when there should be nothing left to answer.